Have you ever walked away from someone and felt like your gut whispered, something's off? Not shouted, whispered. You can't quite put your finger on it, but it lingers. That's not paranoia. That's your intuition picking up on a performance. When we talk about con artists, we often imagine scams, stolen money, or forged documents. But the truth is, some of the most dangerous cons don't come for your wallet. They come for your trust, your time, your heart. And let's talk about charm, not the kind that comes from genuine warmth or kindness, but the kind that feels like it showed up too fast and too shiny. When someone's charm is immediate, intense, and a little too tailored to your exact desires, that's not connection, that's a strategy. Real connection is slow, it's awkward sometimes. It involves truth, time, and a willingness to show up authentically, even when it's messy. Connection says, here's who I am, even if it's not perfect. Charm, when used as a tactic, says, here's exactly who you want me to be for now. People who play this game are master performers. They watch how you react. They listen, but not to understand, to gather data. They pick up on what you value, what you dream of, what you're afraid of, and then they craft a version of themselves that feels like a perfect match. But it's not connection, it's mimicry. The difference, connection requires vulnerability, charm avoids it. A truly connected person doesn't need you to like them instantly. They let you learn them over time. They tell the truth even when it's unflattering. But a con artist's charm is about control. It's about hooking you emotionally so that your defenses come down and your trust goes up. And here's the tricky part. It feels good. We want to believe in it. We're wired for belonging. We love to be seen, to feel special. But charm as a tactic is like candy. Sweet at first, but with no nourishment. And if you rely on it, you'll end up empty, confused, and wondering how you got fooled. If someone's presence feels intoxicating, if it's all compliments and flattery and fast intimacy, pause. Ask yourself, what do I actually know about this person? What have they shown me, not just said to me? Because charm might open the door, but it's character that keeps it open. And if all they're offering is a polished version of themselves, no edges, no depth, no substance, you're not in a connection, you're in a con. At first, their stories might seem impressive, almost too impressive. Maybe they tell you about a wildly successful business they built from nothing, a string of high-profile connections, or the intense personal tragedies they've overcome. You're captivated. You find yourself thinking, wow, this person has really lived. But give it time and you'll start noticing the cracks. Con artists rely on storytelling as a primary tool of manipulation. But unlike honest storytellers who speak from real experience, messy, complicated, flawed, a con artist's stories are curated, tailored, built to elicit admiration, sympathy, or both. And more importantly, they're often not true. At least not entirely. And what makes them so dangerous is how skillfully they weave truth with fiction. Just enough real detail to keep your suspicion down, but just enough fabrication to serve their goals. Their timeline might shift, the facts might blur. Ask them to repeat something they told you last week, and suddenly the details don't quite match. At first, you might brush it off. Maybe I misheard. Maybe they're just tired. Everyone forgets things. That's exactly what they count on, your willingness to rationalize inconsistencies. But here's the difference between a storyteller and a manipulator. A storyteller invites curiosity. A manipulator avoids it. When you ask clarifying questions, wait, when was that again? Or what happened next? Someone who's telling the truth might pause, reflect, and answer sincerely. But a con artist will get defensive. They'll deflect. They might joke, change the subject, or even make you feel guilty for doubting them. They may accuse you of not trusting them. They might say something like, why would I lie about something like that? Or you're really overthinking this. What they won't do is honestly engage because they can't. The more they talk, the more their web of lies risks unraveling. Here's the reality. When someone lives a life that seems too big, too perfect, or too tragic to be true, sometimes it isn't true. And if the details keep shifting, if their stories seem conveniently untraceable or overly dramatic, your suspicion isn't paranoia, it's perception. Pay attention not just to what they're saying, but to how they handle being questioned. Do they welcome curiosity, or do they weaponize your doubt to gain more control? Because at the end of the day, truth holds up under pressure, lies don't. And when someone's stories keep changing, it's not just a red flag, it's a warning shot. Con artists don't always target your weaknesses. They often target your strengths. And one of the most beautiful, powerful, and vulnerable strengths we have as human beings is empathy. Empathy is the ability to stand in someone else's shoes, to feel with them, not just for them. It's the heart's reflex to reach out when someone is hurting, to soften when someone is vulnerable, to say, you don't have to carry that alone. But when someone is playing you, they don't see empathy as a connection. They see it as a tool. Con artists are masterful at reading emotional landscapes. They know how to present themselves as wounded, misunderstood, or perpetually unlucky. They craft narratives designed to trigger your compassion, a difficult childhood, a toxic ex, betrayal by close friends, financial hardship, a chronic illness, sometimes all of the above. Now, let's be clear. Real people experience pain. Real people go through hard things. But here's the difference. Real people share their pain. Con artists use theirs. They use hardship as leverage. They wrap themselves in victimhood so that you'll let your guard down. They know that if they can make you feel responsible for their suffering, even just a little, you're more likely to excuse red flags, forgive dishonesty, or even sacrifice your own needs for their comfort. Suddenly, your boundaries start to blur. You give more time, more money, more energy. You explain away the lies, the inconsistencies, the strange behaviors, because they've been through so much. They make you the caretaker of their chaos. They make their survival feel like your job. And here's what makes it even more confusing. They often show you just enough affection or appreciation to keep you hooked. They breadcrumb your kindness. They make you believe you're the only one who truly understands them, and that leaving would be an abandonment. But here's the truth you need to hold on to. Empathy is not a contract. It does not require you to stay in harm's way. Being kind doesn't mean being blind. Being compassionate doesn't mean being controlled. And being empathetic doesn't mean allowing yourself to be emotionally manipulated by someone who refuses to take responsibility for their own healing. If someone uses your empathy to blur your judgment, to cross your boundaries, or to avoid accountability, that's not a relationship, that's a performance. And you are not an audience for someone's endless drama. You can still care about someone and choose not to be their lifeline. You can hold empathy in one hand and boundaries in the other. Because empathy, when exploited, becomes a trap. But empathy, when honored, becomes a guide. And you deserve relationships where your compassion is valued, not weaponized. Boundaries threaten them. Boundaries are not walls. They're not punishments. They're not signs that you don't care. Boundaries are the clarity that keeps relationships honest. They say, here's what I need to feel safe, respected, and whole. They are how we teach people to love us, not just with words, but with behavior. And here's where things get tricky with a con artist. Healthy boundaries expose their intentions. And that's why they hate them. At first, they might act like your boundaries are no big deal. They'll nod along, smile, and say they understand. But just wait. As soon as those boundaries get in the way of what they want, your time, your money, your loyalty, your silence, the mask slips. They may try to push back in subtle ways. They ask you to bend just this once. They guilt you for needing space. They frame your boundary as selfish, cold, or too much. Or they flatter you into compliance, saying things like, but I thought we were closer than that. And if you hold firm, you might see another tactic: anger, sulking, the silent treatment, or worse, punishment disguised as emotional withdrawal. You see, to a con artist, a boundary isn't a request, it's a threat. It signals that you can't be fully controlled, that you have a sense of self that won't be traded for their approval. And that makes you dangerous, not to the world, but to their game. Because the more you name your limits, the harder it becomes for them to manipulate you. The more you assert your needs, the less room they have to exploit your empathy. The more you say no, the more clearly they hear, I see you. And people who rely on deception, coercion, or charm to get what they want, they cannot stand being seen for who they really are. That's why your boundary feels like an attack to them, even though it's simply a line drawn in the name of your own dignity. Let me say this plainly, and a person who loves you will respect your boundary. A person who's using you will resent them. So if someone consistently reacts to your needs with pressure, guilt, or anger, pay attention. That's not about your boundary being unreasonable. That's about them not wanting to relate to you in a way that honors who you are beyond what they can take from you. You are not difficult for needing space. You are not mean for saying no. You are not broken for expecting reciprocity. You are simply someone with self-respect. And that's not a threat. That's a strength. Our intuition sounds the alarm, but they make you doubt it. There's a moment, quiet, fleeting, but undeniable, when something inside you says, this doesn't feel right. It might come as a gut twist when they tell a story that sounds just a little too perfect. A flicker of confusion when they react too strongly to a simple question, a silent pause in your chest when you're alone, replaying the conversation, wondering why you suddenly feel small or unsure. That moment, that's your intuition. It's not loud, it doesn't always come with evidence, but it's wise, and it's trying to protect you. Here's the truth. Your body often knows before your brain can explain. Your nervous system picks up patterns, tension, inconsistencies, emotional shifts, and starts sending you signals, a feeling of unease, subtle anxiety, a pull to step back and assess. But when you're dealing with a manipulator, especially a skilled one like a con artist, they don't want you listening to yourself. They want you listening to them. So what do? They make you doubt that inner voice. They say things like, you're too sensitive. You always overthink everything. Why are you being so paranoid? You're imagining things. Don't you trust me? And over time, you start to wonder if maybe they're right. You stop asking questions. You quiet your doubts. You override your instincts, not because you're naive, but because you want to believe them. You want the connection to be real. You want the narrative to make sense. You want to be wrong about the red flags. Because being wrong about someone you trusted feels painful. But being right and knowing you ignored the signs can feel worse. Here's the dangerous magic of a con artist. They don't just deceive you, they teach you to distrust yourself. And that's what gives them power. But you don't have to stay in that loop. Rebuilding trust in your intuition is not about certainty. It's about curiosity. When something feels off, you don't have to prove it immediately. You just have to pay attention. You have permission to pause, to gather more information, to ask follow-up questions, to listen to what your body and your instincts are telling you, even if someone else is insisting you're wrong. Because real love, real connection, real truth, they don't fear your questions, they don't punish your perception, and they honor it. You don't need a smoking gun to trust your gut. You just need the courage to stop explaining it away. So if your body says pause, pause. If your chest tightens around their words, listen. If your sleep feels disrupted after seeing them, wonder why. And your intuition is not dramatic. It is not irrational. It is not something to be silenced. It is your oldest form of knowing, and it rarely lies. And the people who love you, truly, honestly love you, will never need to convince you to ignore it. Trust is one of the most sacred things we can offer another person. It's not a transaction. It's not a checkbox. It's a process built slowly through consistent truth, vulnerability, and mutual respect. But a con artist doesn't want to earn your trust. They want to bypass it. They don't want to walk with you through the awkward, beautiful, necessary journey of becoming known. They don't want to be questioned. They don't want to be challenged. They want access fast, full, unquestioned. And when you hesitate, when you slow things down or ask for space, they take it personally. That's when the pressure begins. They might say things like, why don't you trust me? I've done nothing wrong. This is about your past, not me. If you don't believe in me, what's the point of this relationship? Notice how those words aren't about building understanding. They're about silencing your uncertainty. It's not about showing they're trustworthy. It's about making you feel guilty for needing time, discernment, or boundaries. But here's the thing. Anyone who rushes trust doesn't deserve it. Because trust, real trust, isn't something we owe people just because they ask for it. It's something they earn through their actions by being consistent, even when it's inconvenient.